Okay, welcome to Shining the Light On. How are you, Therese?
Doing great. It's a beautiful day, so fingers crossed it stays that way.
And today is episode 7 already, and today we're going to be diving into inner child and ascension. You all loved last week's ascension chat a lot, so we thought, why not add another component to this very important conversation, which is the inner child. And I know we've both had many experiences with our inner child and healing and, inner child temper tantrums and all the things in between that have helped guide us to deeper awareness on our journeys. And so I'm super excited to dive into this. So why don't we have you start with, like, maybe because there's archetypes around inner child, archetypal energies.
Archetypal energy, yeah.
Yes. So why don't we talk about that first?
Well, this is what's really interesting is like the child archetype is one that is universally shared because every person who enters this planet starts as a child. So we all come in with the child archetype, but that archetype's actually kind of a broad umbrella for many facets of the child that comes in. So when we're talking about archetypal energy, we're talking about a sort of collective expression of this energy. It's not owned by one person because we can all experience it, and we have all experienced it. So archetypes sort of work as like a collective blueprint that exists energetically that we all can tap into. And the more that we tap into it, the stronger that archetype sort of grows and gets, right? So, but we all have the experience of the child, and therefore the archetypes that come with the children, the facets of this major archetype, also we all have experience of and hold. So we hold the keys of these blueprints within our energetic system. However, what usually happens for us is one or maybe two will dominantly come forward and sort of be the aspect that we recognize, where other aspects can actually go dormant or offline. And so what I'm going to share with you now is a breakdown of 6 major archetypes or facets of the child. And while you're listening, you can hear, and you'll probably hear your experience in multiple and maybe even all of these facets, but one will be the one where you're like, okay, that's really resonant. I know that's kind of my experience, right? That's what you're probably going to hear. So first I want to talk about is the orphan child. And by the way, these archetypes will show up in literature, they'll show up in mythology, they'll show up in movies and TV shows. So orphan child, can you give me an example from our literature or our just culture of what an orphan child would be? What's a character you can think of?
Oh my gosh. There's a movie, Matilda, where she's a little girl and she feels left
That's
out.
really,
yeah.
You got the nose right there, because in my mind it was like, okay, orphan child, no mother, no father. Okay, Harry Potter, what is it, Oliver from Charles Dickens. It's like, think of all the children, like what about Elsa and Anna from Frozen? Their parents died. So a lot of times when we think about the orphan child, we're thinking about a child without a family structure, like their parents are gone. However, what the example you brought up relates to the orphan child as well, because in the story of Matilda, she actually has a mother and a father, but they have sort of pushed her out of the family circle. She's seen as the black sheep. Okay, so one thing you can know is if you feel black sheep energy, if you've ever felt on the outside of the family circle, you actually hold the orphan child archetype in your energy. So orphan child energy usually learns how to become independent at an early age, right? So they're learning their independence early in life, and they tend on their shadow side to hold feelings of abandonment, right? So they have the abandonment issues, which can show up as, right, food addiction, can be one of the ways that we deal with those feelings of abandonment. And they seek a surrogate family. So they're always seeking their soul family, soul tribe, support groups this is how they sort of surrogate a family structure or something where they're included inside the tribal circle. And one of the ways you can find out if this archetype is sort of stuck in your system, meaning you're expressing it more than others, is A, if you're holding on to those abandonment issues, if you still continue to feel a sense of abandonment, and B, if you resist growing up. So this is interesting because the orphan child wants to sort of, they grew up too fast in a way, and they want to remain a child. They want something around them that protects them and creates a sense of like, that they can rely on something rather than having to rely on themselves. So when they're in that resisting to growing up, then you know that this archetype sort of stuck or fixed in your system. So the next one I think is probably the most common. It's the one that everyone would immediately relate to. Let me see if Amber can guess what it is. What archetype is this?
The wounded?
Yes.
I was like, I feel like I had a lot of that growing up until
wounded child. Wounded
Yeah.
child. Okay, so this is one that a lot of people relate to. In fact, later we're going to talk about how society plays and culture plays a part in this, and why it's the kind of the dominant one everyone knows. So the wounded child holds memories of abuse or trauma in their system. And they see these painful experiences from their past as having a substantial influence on who they are right now.
Mhm.
For example, let's say you are a man and you have a hard time finding personal leadership. You might go, well, I have a hard time finding personal leadership because my dad was never there.
Right.
Right. And so they're sort of, they are projecting the personal responsibility onto the responsibility of one of the parents as they grow up. Now, that's sort of a shadow aspect of who they are. On the other hand, the positive of the wounded child is it actually instills a sense of compassion in that person because they understand pain and they understand suffering and trauma. And many times they can take this pain and turn it into a path of service, right? For example, you know, if you've dealt with eating disorders or pain like that in the past, then you become a compassionate person who wants to help heal that in another person. And so that is how it can show up in the light. But when we get stuck in the wounded child, how to figure out if we're stuck there is we resist forgiving those we see who've hurt us. Right. So that's when that pattern sort of becomes a stuck pattern. Okay. The next one's my favorite. It's my favorite one, which is the magical child. And the magical child sees the potential for sacred beauty in all things. And also embodies the wisdom and courage in the face of difficult circumstances. And an example they gave for this one is the Diary of Anne Frank. So Anne Frank being in this horrific situation, and yet still able to see the beauty in the world, the beauty in people, and having hope and the courage to face, another day. That all comes from the magical child. So they are very tapped into the world of imagination and they see potential everywhere. The shadow side of the magical child is someone who's seeing that everywhere, but doesn't ever actually see it. Like, for example, if you're like, things will work out, they're going to work out for the best, they're going to get better, but then they don't actually see it improve, they can become the cynical adults. They can actually like shift, go from one extreme to the other. And the reason why the magical child can go into a shadow is if the person resists taking action. And so instead of having the ability to see the potential, so it's like your imagination, your magical child is showing you the blueprint to take action. Instead of seeing it as the blueprint for taking action, they see it as a magical fix. And so they resist action and they sit back and do nothing because it's going to turn out just fine, right? It's going to fix itself. And that's when it can go into a shadow of itself. All right. So the next one is also a good one. This is the divine child. Now, an archetypal person we would see as the divine child would be like Jesus. We all know the story. Most of us know the story of Jesus. He's an example of a divine child archetype, but we all hold this. And this is really about sort of the innocence and the purity of your soul, and a godlike connection to divinity itself. So you feel the divine within you. The difference between the magical child and the divine child is with a divine, there's a type of redemption. And that comes with it, the power of redemption, the power to re-purify, right? To not have to hold any of the negative patterns. And it's interesting because in this one, a lot of people didn't see it as having a shadow. Like, how could the divine child have a shadow self? And it's really interesting. So they see source or God as benevolent force. They see it as a benevolent and loving force. However, when they're too stuck in this archetype, they feel an inability to protect themselves from negativity. So when something bad or negative happens, they feel like they just have to take it. And however, it's interesting because then they quote, and by the way, this information is coming from pretty much the queen of archetypes, who's Carolyn Myss. So her book, Sacred Contracts, breaks down all these archetypes. But she was talking about how in the Bible, Jesus actually showed anger and wrath at those who would claim to be pious or pure, but be swindling people on purpose. And so it was a way to show that you can be both divine and have righteous anger, that they coexist, they can coexist
Right.
together. But people who don't think they can act on that part, they get stuck in this archetype and they sort of become a victim because they feel like, because everything is love, then I always have to act from nothing but love. And whatever their idea of love is what's going to play out. Right?
Makes sense.
So if their idea of love doesn't include justice, then they won't have a sense of justice in how they try to move forward, if that makes sense.
Yep. Totally makes sense.
All right. So we got two more.
Mhm.
One is the nature child. The nature child is the one that feels a deep connection to nature and the natural world. So this is a person who naturally loves to be outside, naturally talks to trees, naturally interested in bugs and the grass and all that good stuff, and tends to have a close affinity to animals. So many people who grow up to take care of animals are natural children, nature children at heart. They have that archetype. So they're very compassionate, but what's interesting is they're a beautiful blend of compassion and an inner toughness that ensures their survival. It's like they know they'll survive, right? The shadow side of the nature child is someone who turns this off and they become abusive to nature or animals, right? So they've locked that out of themselves. So again, when we talk about the shadow, it's not necessarily something that's coming forward. It can be a part of us that recedes and goes dormant. And because you're not connected to it, it can then act from this place of a void.
Makes
right?
sense.
So a void of compassion.
Right.
But people who can get stuck in the nature child, they have an inability to feel whole without nature. So they can't see how they're whole in and of themselves. They feel whole when they're part of the whole ecosystem, if that makes sense.
Yep. Totally.
And that's where it kind of can get stuck in one gear for them. And then the last one we're going to look at is the eternal child. And an archetype that we see of this is like Peter Pan represents the eternal child. I don't want to grow up. They resist the willingness to take personal responsibility. So they're a little bit like the orphan child who doesn't want to grow up because they just want to be taken care of. This one takes it to the next level. They don't want to grow up because they don't want to be responsible for anything that they do or say, right? Now, the positive side of an eternal child is to feel your inner child all the way through old age. Like nothing, you don't see age as a limit to stopping you from enjoying your life. That's the beautiful aspect of an eternal child. And then of course, the negative aspect that we often see play out in our society is a need to be young constantly. Like, I can't grow old. I can't show that. I don't want it. I don't want to see that. And they're basically fighting or resisting the aging process.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing all those. For those of you watching live, feel free to share in the chat which ones you think are you or that resonated for you. Definitely number 1 and 2 for me, like that. I've always had a fear of abandonment in this lifetime, but I've actually not been physically abandoned. In past lives, I was by loved ones or loved ones died. But just that feeling of abandonment, right? And fear of people leaving, and this whole inner child aspect makes sense in the wounding, right? Like for me, my biggest wounding experience was when I was 5, my first day taking the school bus. And I was so excited to take friends. Just envision the 5-year-old me with my little mushroom cut. So just like, I'm going to make new friends. I'm so excited. I get on the bus. The first thing that happens, the older boys call me fat and ugly. Look at her. She's fat. She's ugly. Right. Oh, this is this boy's girlfriend that is on the bus. And I'm like, I don't even know this boy. And then everyone's laughing at me, making fun of me. And it just crushed me. And then for the next 20 years of my life, I took on this identity of I must be fat and ugly. And it was their fault. They did that to me. I can't forgive them. In fact, when I get older and I become a young adult, I'm going to get the revenge body. And am I ever going to like make men's life a living hell for the way that they treated me? And that's like the ego and all that wounding, like that. It was not me in the present time. It was this accumulation of traumas and experiences from that younger age. And I think that this is why it's so important for us when we're on a healing journey to not just like heal the now, but to go back and go, okay, what experiences did I go through from a young age and growing up? Because people think they hear inner child and they think 5. Inner child wounded, it could have been you last week that got hurt or upset or triggered about something. It doesn't necessarily just mean like when you were a child, right? And what we don't realize is a lot of our insecurities, hurt, blame, shame, all these things that we will feel and project and experience now come from these experiences, right, that have accumulated through our whole life. And that fuels the ego. And the ego is that voice in the mind that's like, you're not good enough. You're never going to be loved. You're never going to have this until you have that body. You're never going to have the success or the money or blah, blah, like all those stories, right? You can't forgive that person. You need to hang on. That's the ego. So a lot of this inner child stuff is fueling that ego voice. And then we're just staying completely out of our power. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you're saying is, I always see my inner child, it's like Russian nesting dolls, you know, the little doll with the bigger doll over it. Right. And so you can access that by layers, like what Amber is talking about. And it's interesting because different layers will express different facets of this inner child, right there. I can look back at parts of my childhood where I remember talking to fairies, and this was normal to me. Like I knew where they lived, I could see them. It was so cool. Like obviously my magical child was very active, and also the nature child, like those guys were hanging out and having a great time. There are other times where I can remember, especially when I was going through my therapy period, where the wounded child was like right there, right up and forward. And it's like, oh yeah, everything. Now I'm remembering, you know, everything. The one that shocked me actually was, I wasn't expecting to identify the orphan child. And then after reading it, I was like, holy crap, that's how like, I didn't realize I held this archetype so much. I mean, and you know, it's interesting because I was saying to Amber, there's definitely a few that are played up in our society that are meant to like be overemphasized to sort of trap us in this matrix of lower emotions. And the one I want to start with is the orphan child, because I want you to think of every like movie you can think of that Disney makes. How many parents do these characters have? Sometimes they have one and lose it, like in Bambi, which was one of the most traumatic movies a kid can watch. Is watching your mom die, you know, because you become Bambi when you watch the movie, you become the protagonist. So you watch your mom die and then you're abandoned and alone.
Same with the Lion King. Simba watches his father die and like the evil uncle, like it just, I would
Right.
honestly, now that I think about being a kid and watching those movies, like it was horrible. And I think that's where my fear of my parents dying or something happening to them actually came from, was after I started watching those movies.
Yeah, and there's this mythology that they like to play out about the chosen one, and the chosen one always comes from an abandoned or orphaned past. So
Right.
like there's, Harry Potter, I love that story series, but starts out and the kid doesn't even make it to like 1 years old and his parents are gone, and it's, you know, the parents die defending him to protect him, which is noble, but still,
Mhm.
then he's the story of this chosen one, and it's a mythology that gets played in our culture and almost like revered, but it's like, you
Yeah.
got to wonder what's the dark psychological reason that they
Yeah.
do this, and they show it to children, right? And it is to, if we go and we take a trip down, let's look at what the intention of the school system is, the way the school industry was built. And it was to break down the nuclear family and to separate children from family and make you more easy to control and manipulate, and have you be a good little worker bee.
Yeah. Get you prepared
So
for your
there
work
is,
life.
that's right. So part of this working with the orphan child archetype on the societal level was to literally make you feel, because again, through books, through movies, through television, we insert ourselves into these situations just naturally. That's just what human beings do. We're trying to be compassionate and relate and understand. And if they make a powerful protagonist, then you're going to go through what they go through, right? It's the hero's journey, which is the ultimate archetypal journey. So this orphan child is one of the ones that they really worked on us in society in a psychological way. It was a, silent psychological operation, but it's one that now everybody relates to. And one of the ways people try to heal it is they try to recognize, oh, I'm the black sheep, I'm on the outside, and I'm here to be different. I'm here to break chains. I'm here to create change, which might be true. Of course it might be true. I mean, both can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
That there is a natural sort of feeling of separation or being on the outside. And especially as we talk about ascension, from the perspective of interdimensional beings coming to the earth to help raise the vibration, many people who identify as like a star seed or a light worker have a sensation of, I'm not from here. Something's not right. I feel outside. I somehow feel outside when I know on some level I'm supposed to be inside. So why do I feel outside? So this is a real feeling that we're holding that's also getting hyped up and sort of amplified. And again, remember, these archetypes are facets, like on faces on a crystal. So they already exist, but what happens when you over amplify one? Well, we know that when the orphan gets over amplified, they don't want to grow up. And what does that mean? I need someone to take care of me. And as adults, who do we turn to do that?
The government.
Yeah. I mean, at least, right? Or companies, organizations.
Yeah.
I mean, Amber's been doing a lot of work on her social media to show like what big companies put in food and things like that, right? But and we become, why don't we look? Why don't we know? And it's the orphan child thing about this, you're taking care of me, right? Like you're going to take care of me, right?
You would never do anything to harm me. You have my greatest good in mind.
Totally. So mix that now with the two other archetypes that I feel like they're really using. And when I say I am talking about sort of people with an agenda to control, right? They're using aspects that naturally exist within your psyche, but overproducing or overemphasizing them to a point where we go out of alignment. And then the other archetypes are pushed into shadow, which, as you know, everything has a shadow, even the divine has a shadow. That's why we see good and evil. That's why we see the best of the best and the worst of the worst. So the others that they really push forward are, for example, the wounded child, which I was saying, you're going to know what that is. All of us have heard about it. It was very popularized in psychology to talk about this. I mean, with, Freud and Jung and, Campbell bringing in helpful information, but still an overemphasis on you were hurt, these people hurt you, and that's why you're the way you are.
Yeah.
Right. And when we do that, then we go into that place of feeling like everything that you have no control. Right. So like I said,
Right.
we see our current circumstances as being heavily impacted by what happened to us as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So, what example would you bring to that? What was something you had to work through to get over that thought?
Yeah, I think it was really like the trust. So I'll give you two things. With the example of the fat and ugly on the bus, well, part of it was I had to learn how to forgive and realize that they didn't know any better. They were like 7 years old, right? That's for whatever reason they felt saying that. They had no idea what they were doing, and I didn't know how to like brush a comment like that off. So I am going to learn how to forgive them, and then I am going to help my inner child feel safe and help her get over that through talking to her, inner child visualizations, helping her cry and release those emotions and let them go, and be there for her and have her back and know she's so loved, and let go of the rest. And so forgiveness was a big aspect. And I think trust in other circumstances, especially with my mom, who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis before I was born. And so growing up and watching her decline and having no control and like nothing I could do, and witnessing her go through struggles that no child should ever have to watch their parent go through, and not knowing how to process it. I think then moving forth and like going trust, like I didn't have control, but can I trust that like there's so many lessons and learnings that I'm going to have because of this experience, and it's going to lovingly motivate and inspire me to want to heal and take as good of care of myself as I can to prevent, and to have so much compassion and patience witnessing her going through what she's going through. Right. Because I was in this mode of like, why did it have to be this way? And why did my mom have to go through this? And like, why did I have, right? So that all of this is what accumulated to help me heal with my inner child and empower me more. Right.
Totally. And when, I can think of so many examples, because with the wounded child, it's never just like one subject that it gets fixated on. It sort of sees through the lens of, because I was hurt in the past, this is my life now.
Yeah.
And so there's so many ways that I can see that. Like I remember, with my own healing journey, especially when it comes to my body and food, so many things were like, I was so heavily criticized in the past, and that's why I'm stuck here. Right. And it's this person's fault. It's the comments that they said and the way they treated me, or this other person. There's just so many reasons to hold on. And one of the things that Amber and I have talked about privately, and I'm sure she talks about this on her podcast all the time, is, the weight is holding on. Mm-hmm. You're holding on. So it's like when the wounded child's really hyperactive like that, it's almost like you just keep hurting yourself. Yeah. Over and over again. You just keep re-traumatizing yourself, and the body, especially in women, right, will respond to, okay, I've got to protect you, and I'm going to put all these layers on, because nothing's safe. Nothing is safe when the wounded child is so active. And what's really interesting is, the wounded child, like I said, when it's over hyperactive, it resists forgiveness. It doesn't want to let it go. It doesn't want to say that, that person was coming from this place, or maybe those kids on the bus were being, verbally abused at home. And so that was their normal way of communicating with people, right? So they're projecting onto you what's happening to them, right? Mm-hmm. And when we're out of this fixation on who hurt me, can we actually do that? Yeah. But when this is so hyper blown, we don't want to forgive. Now, how could anyone with a dark agenda be using this to their advantage? Forgiveness is literally how you get out of a karmic cycle. Mm-hmm. It's how you end it. It's how you can make it stop, is when you find the point of forgiveness. And forgiveness can start with forgiving yourself. And then it can be like, I forgive other people, not because I'm saying what they did wasn't wrong, but because I want to be free. So I forgive you too.
Yeah.
Right. And then we set ourselves free. So with getting trapped in a karmic cycle means you're going to keep repeating the same behavior over and over, which means your frequency is going to stay at a certain level all the time. And it's just, you're going to keep re-traumatizing yourself. And so it's like easy. It's like a bonus for a negative control group that wants to keep frequency low for their own purposes, is all they have to do is reinforce that you should traumatize yourself and not forgive. And, you need to talk about everybody who hurt you and really fixate on it. And our egos love this. Our ego gets that message. And it's like, right, that's my job. My job is to continually re-traumatize myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can see that in myself and things I've done. And my dad I love him to death, but he's always manifesting like things breaking down. And then he keeps affirming that this always happens to me. And like, he goes into that mode and like, doesn't realize that like, he's repeating this cycle because of things like this inner child. It's fascinating.
Right. Now, remember, like the wounded child, again, they all serve a positive or a negative aspect. So the thing is, we're kind of guaranteed to be wounded when we're here. And I think that on a soul level, we know that. We kind of accept it as part of the mission. We're like, right, when I come to Earth, the frequency is so low, it's really hard to enter into a swamp and not get covered in mud. You're going to get battle damage, but the gift of it is sort of learning how to, and I think this is like a keto move, but it's called, if you get hit with a blow, you learn to absorb the blow and redirect the energy, which the wounded child can actually do quite well when it's in its light, right? It can realize, ow, that hurt. Okay, that hurt. So if it hurt me, then I bet it hurt you. And so therefore, I am going to stop doing things that hurt me. So we start activating the golden rule, right? Which is do unto others as you would have done to you. And when you realize something hurts, you are likely to become the chain breaker if you're conscious of it. So you will stop that action from progressing and moving forward to someone else. And not only that, but once you see that you can stop the cycle, then you start to feel empowered and you desire not only your own healing, but then you desire the healing for others. And then you become an advocate for healing.
Yeah.
So it has a very beautiful purpose. It's just being able to get out of the re-traumatization that happens over and over again.
Yes, exactly. So why don't we talk a little bit about some ways we can start breaking free of that? Because I think that this is where people get stuck, because it's comfortable to just keep repeating the same thoughts, beliefs, and behavior, right? But it causes a lot of suffering.
And I really feel like this is a point where you need help. You need someone to be an objective helper in your life that can just hear you. They can hold space for you, but hear you and be like honest with you. I love doing sessions with Amber because when we're talking, like if my ego comes out and starts saying something, she'll be like, okay, that's your ego. And I'll be like, damn it.
That lovingly calling it out and having accountability and support and being lovingly challenged in those moments, because when we're so caught up in it, we can't necessarily like pinpoint it as easily as an outsider who has a big awareness of the ego, right?
Totally. And, with the ego and especially the wounded child, this is where I've heard people talk about tapes that run in your head. So it's like these thoughts are not active thoughts, they're actually on a loop. It's like a tape playing over and over again, this line of thinking that you're thinking. And it's so ingrained in your consciousness that you don't even see it as kind of like an ego-based rote response. You think you're having a revelation every time it plays out, but it really is it's a pattern you're stuck in that you're unconscious of.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is where coaching is so powerful, because not only do you talk about what you're feeling and express it, then you're asked questions. You're asked how to reflect and build awareness. What does it feel like when I'm in my power and I'm loving myself versus giving it away and going back into this wounding and letting that take over, right? Like, what are things I can do to help, clear this out and let go of this old wounding and these negative emotions, right? Like, how can I nurture this part of me that got hurt or traumatized or whatever it is, right? And so I think that this is so powerful to have that guidance, be given tools and support, and also at the same time be lovingly called out in the moment, because that's what sparks the change. And so a couple things that I can suggest for starters, number one is be willing to create some space and time for a self-care practice where you can start reflecting on and building awareness of like, what triggers me to go into my wounded inner child? What triggers me to go into the abandoned child, like the orphan archetype? Like, what triggers me to go there? Because I know for me in the past with the body image piece, it was right now assuming that guys don't want to be with me because I don't look like the photoshopped magazine thing. And like, okay, how do I take my power back? That's false. That's a story. Positive affirmations, maybe some EFT tapping, connecting with my inner child and telling her how beautiful and incredible and full of love she is, and to trust the timing of meeting the right person, right? Going into like, oh my gosh, like I'm so afraid. What if I get abandoned by this person? And it's like, I can't control like the future. However, what I can do is appreciate the present moment. And how do I take my power back in this moment? Well, I can breathe. I can like reassure myself. I can, encourage myself and have gratitude and appreciation for the moment. One of my favorite things to do to help start like healing our inner child and these past experiences is to actually, and I'll just describe it quickly, but you can take your time with it, but to think of a memory where you were really impacted that you feel is still impacting the way you show up and live your life and think to this day, right? Whether it's a body image thing, somebody hurt you, someone said something to you, you had to abruptly move across the country and it felt very traumatic for you, whatever it is. And what I envision you to do is imagine you around that time frame, close your eyes, take some deep breaths, envision that you standing in front of you, observe them, and then you start a conversation with them. Hello, how are you? How did it feel for you to go through this? Let them express, let them cry if they need to. You may even get emotional. And then from there, after they've expressed, you get to ask them like, how can I support you to heal some of this, to let some of this go, to forgive this? Like, how can I have your back here? Because I'm here now and I want to help you release this. And they'll give you guidance of what they want and how you can support them. And over time, you can keep going back in and working on chipping away, especially if it's a bigger item. You may have to come back in several times, but you can start chipping away at it. And you may cry and get emotional while they do. And then you can hug them and tell them, I'm here for you. I love you so much. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but I'm here now and I'm going to support you and I've got your back and I'm not going to abandon you, or I'm not going to call you those names. Like, reassurance is huge for you to give your inner child and to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And as you do so, you will feel a massive energetic and emotional weight, like lifted off your shoulders, lifted out of the part of you that feels heavy and dense. And that will help you regulate your hormones, calm your nervous system. It will help your body release weight, because a lot of the weight we hang on to is these past inner child experiences and a lot of other benefits, right? Filling the void, healing your relationship with food, etc. So those are a couple things you can try for sure. And if you want more, I'm happy to consult with you in a consultation or talk about the membership or other things I have to offer where we go deeper. How about
That's
you, Therese?
fantastic. I would add to that, I mean, all of that, and I would listen to, what are the child archetypes that you heard that you're like, oh, that sounds really nice.
Yeah, totally.
You have that. Bring it online. For example, if you want to feel more of your magical inner child, you can focus on the life you desire to create. That instantly activates the magical inner child, because that's the part of you who sees all the potential. Right. Just remember, when activating this part of yourself, that whatever she or he is showing you is the blueprint for action. And as long as you're taking some kind of action, no matter how small, you're not going to get stuck in the shadow of that aspect, right? You're going to be active there. Or with the divine child, for example, is feeling your absolute divine connection to source, that you and source are indeed one, which is what this part of ourself feels. But remembering that you not only are the inner child, but you're also this adult, and that this inner child many times is waiting for the inner parent to show up, which is the piece that a lot of us need to learn. We're not taught this. This isn't something that's socially understood or accepted, but every time my inner child has had forward momentum and healing, it's because the inner parent shows up. So many times I have to remind that part of me, especially when I'm having like mother wound issues or stuff like that, is I have to go in and I have to remind her that the mom is here. I'm here. I'm holding you. I am taking care of you. I'm not going anywhere. Anything you need, you can come right to me. I'm listening. I am, and I oftentimes picture me holding little me. And there's that visualization alone. I mean, just now, just saying it sent a wave of warmth through my body. It's like, oh, thank God. Like there's this relief that flows through, because this part of us is always seeking the parent. It's always seeking the protective force. Right. And that's one of the things that will help stabilize the divine child. We're going to get into how these work with Ascension. Obviously, the divine child is one of the keys to Ascension, but it needs stabilization. And remember, it feels like it's vulnerable. It feels like it's sort of exposed and it cannot protect itself from negative forces, meaning like psychic attack or bad vibrational energy or programming or conditioning that's going on. It feels like it's exposed to it. So in order to stabilize the divine child, which is going to be key for Ascension energy, we have to show that divine child that there's also a divine parent that's here. I'm ready to, I am grown up. So this is balancing all, you can balance all the types right now. You can claim that I am grown up. That would balance your orphan child archetype. You can also claim that I can forgive all hurt from the past and I have my power now and I have the power to create the life I want. And that would balance the wounded child. You can balance your magical child by claiming that whenever I get divinely inspired, I will take action if I am called to do so within myself. Right. So if I get it, like, for example, I really wanted to change the painting behind me and I got inspired and called to do it. I was like, there's a time for change and it's now. And it wants to be with this painting. And so I was like, immediately started taking action. And in this way, what I've done is I've made sure that the flow of inspiration that's coming in keeps coming in. Because if you don't take action, when inspiration hits, it's sort of like this beautiful bird that lights on your shoulder and whispers in your ear. It's like, I've got a plan for you. But if you don't take action, then the bird flies away and goes somewhere else. So to keep that channel or that flow of magical child coming, you've got to take action, and that will balance that child. Same with the divine child, is what we just said. Be the inner parent. Let it know that not only do I accept my purity, my innocence, and my pure connection to source, I also have the ability to protect and surround myself, and that I am not at the whim of anyone. I am a sovereign being, and that balances that aspect right there. With the nature child, it's recognizing that you are nature. Like, you don't need nature to be whole. You are nature. Right. And therefore you get to enjoy the rest of nature, but you are not less than nature, right? You are already whole, and that balances that archetype. And then with the eternal child it's like growing up, but it's like, I actually enjoy responsibility. I enjoy, because it means I have power and that I'm manifesting what I want. Because whenever we are receiving what we want, it naturally comes with the honor of responsibility. For example, if you want a pet, a dog or a cat, and you are blessed with manifesting this animal companion in your life, you're going to have responsibility. You're going to have to take care of it. You're going to have to, deal with its droppings. You're going to have to take it to the vet. All of this is your responsibility. But the eternal child that's balanced loves the responsibility they have, because it means they have successfully manifested in their life.
Love that so much. This is beautiful. I think, share in the chat what you're taking away, what you're learning. And if you're watching the replay, do the same in the comments, because I think, and it's 444 here, 4 watching for 44 minutes in. So we've got this beautiful angel number again, just like last time.
Love it.
But share, because I think there's just so much here for all of us to take a little snippet away and start playing with, exploring, addressing this. So is there anything else you want to share before we get into some cards? I feel like it's
sure. So how it all connects to ascension is, in order for us to experience that ascension, we're going to have to create this balance. So basically, everything that we just shared with you about how to identify it and how to work with it and balance it, these are the things that like lock you into the timeline where you experience that ascension of consciousness. You're every time you are balancing these aspects, you are ascending in your own consciousness. It's interesting because, we're looking at it through the lens of the inner child, but really these are the steps. If you were to take the inner child away, even the steps themselves about, practicing forgiveness or recognizing your wholeness or embracing responsibility, all of these things raise your frequency, right? And my feeling about ascension is it's already here. It's already happening. People are going to 5D all the time. We're just keep coming back down. And so we don't recognize, hey, I was on the new earth, or I was in that timeline in that frequency, but now everything seems crappy. You're going there more and more often. It's just, we're trying to learn how to stabilize the vibration, and working with your inner child helps you do it.
I love that. Thank you. So let's get into some cards. So the first question that I have is, how are these archetypes impacting like the collective and the ascension? I guess more so like the wounding, the orphan, like, because I feel like it's been very polarized and it's been playing a big role.
Yes, let's ask. Woo. All right. Well, it's actually facilitating the change. So it's these energies are archetypal energy, or our spiritual energies, actually. I mean, it's a way that's, like I said, it's a collective energy, and it's how spirit expresses. So it's creating a change on the physical plane. We've got the Two of Discs here, and the Two of Discs, also known as the Two of Pentacles, represents that physical plane. So it's about aligning to change. It's giving us an opportunity to see it. And so here's the beautiful thing. It's like the universe always seeks balance. Energy always seeks balance. Right. So whenever someone takes something to an extreme, the balance will appear. The pendulum, will swing from one direction to another. For example, I watch a lot of like different political people talking on like YouTube or Rumble and things like that. And what they'll often show are like these college kids who are getting like law degrees and things like that. So they're in their mid to late 20s, acting like infants around certain topics. And I mean, literally screaming and freaking out about any kind of pushback or different perspective. Yeah, they're freaking out. And we're watching this out here on the outside going, oh my God, like what's happening? But here's the beauty of it. They went to such an extreme that it shook us awake and went, wait, what's going on in there? That they're reducing their, their behavior and intelligence. They're regressing to a younger age where they're literally throwing a tantrum. What it does is it highlights where the problem is, and our eyes get drawn to it. So that's how it's working. Weirdly, it works, right? The one pole draws the other pole. So in this world in general, if you have an excess of darkness, which we did, which is why all these beings from outside Earth were like, okay, we've got to help and manifest, is what happened is you had one extreme happen and it called the other extreme. So we can look at it and go, oh my God, things are out of balance, but being out of balance calls the polar opposite to come in to play. So it has this amazing ability to right itself. It's like, all we have to do is recognize it. We a part of it for us, for those of us who are not really locked into the matrix or the story anymore, we just need to not be too reactive, right? We need to remember we're about responding, not reacting. So when we see the extreme polar opposite of what we think is healthy or good, our response is we're being asked to be more measured and recognize that the universe is also going to write this. We still have to take action. We still have to, make choices and take stands where appropriate, but the universe is bringing it to your attention because you are an element to bring balance to it.
Yes, I love that. So one other question is there a way certain archetypes are being targeted to slow down the ascension?
Yeah, and we kind of covered that.
I guess,
So
yeah.
for example, they one of the ones we didn't get to was the eternal child. This one has been super hijacked as well. And we can see it in our, like, for example, one of the lesser ways we see it is in the Instagram face filters that are literally changing people's faces, changing your face. It's not about smoothing out the skin anymore or blurring fine lines. It's literally reconstructing your face to look like someone else. And that's one shadow side of it. We see it with like the extreme body alterations to look like other people. We see it with well, I know we don't really get into the really dark topics, but there are dark topics where people are doing nefarious things to maintain youth and beauty. And we see that being played out. So that's one of the archetypes, and the wounded child and the orphan child, that those are the three that really get messed with because their dark sides are pretty strong. And debilitating to the individual. So the detriment really does attack the individual expressing it more so than other people who get in the person's path, right? So that those are the three that get hijacked the most. But one of the questions I had, and I'd asked the team before, because I know we were going to wrap up soon here. So I just want to wrap it up with the message from the team, if you're okay with that. Okay, so I had asked the team, like, what is the purpose that you would have us talk about when it comes to the inner child and ascension? And they said to me, they were like, when this crystal of inner child, all facets are balanced and radiating, you're experiencing this wholeness of being on the inside. And when that all comes together, you really see the illusion for what it is, that this is not who you are. This is you're having sort of a lucid dream right now. And instead of being afraid of that fact, you remember, I came here to play. This is the playground, which means I get to create anything I want here. And so you stop worrying about how am I trapped in an illusion. You remember, I came to a playground and I'm here to play. And the child archetype, as we all know, play is one of the major intentions of a child is to play and explore and see and test themselves. What's my power? What can I do? How can I change things to what I want it to be, right? And they were like, that's really why the inner child is so important, is because that's where you can access your creator being abilities the easiest.
We are powerful. I'll share the quick example that we were talking about earlier, which was there were a bunch of fires started in my province. I live in Alberta, Canada, and central and northern Alberta. All of a sudden last week, we had like 50 chemtrails every day. It got really hot, and then boom, all these fires popping up. And of course, they're preaching the, whole sea change agenda. And I'm like, no, like they're creating this because we have an election coming up later this month. And of course, they want to mess with that, right? That's always what it is. Anyways, and so I was extra like freaking out because it's close to the area where I grew up. And so it always hits your heartstrings more, right?
But they're also arsonists, right? I mean,
so I'm going to get to that. Yeah.
Okay.
So essentially I didn't know that yet. So at first I'm just like, oh my gosh, weather manipulation, like they're pushing this. And then I'm like, oh, the election's later this month. Of course they're doing this. And so I'm freaking out. And then I start seeing people sharing that like, they're catching arsonists, and there's all these people lighting boxes on fire, throwing them in the ditch and throwing them in the forest and starting these fires. And then it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. I'm like, wow, it's nice to see people sharing this and getting the word out and hearing that they're starting to arrest these people. Like people are waking up and seeing and connecting the dots. And then after my freak out, I'm like, okay, like, what can I do? I don't have control. Okay, I'm going to sit here in meditation and I'm going to envision rain, ice, snow, cooler weather. I'm going to ask the archangels, like all the extraterrestrials, the Pleiadians, Andromedans, all my family ETs to help come and assist, to bring justice, to get these people arrested, put these fires out, and to have this be complete. And it was to the point Sunday and Monday where the roads were closed for half of the drive we would have had to go to the location we're going this weekend for my mom's celebration of life. And as of today, all the roads are open, all the fires are out. And so I'm like, oh, thank you. I'm going to keep practicing. Like, this is the power of one. And then like messaging other people, like, can we all envision this just for a couple of minutes and like help, like playing, imagination, inner child. You're so right. It makes a huge difference. Like, don't discount how powerful you are.
That's right. And our inner child knows this, especially that magical as well as divine child. These are the two archetypes that will really help speed up our own personal ascension process. So play with what you want to create. You don't have to accept things as they are, and you don't need to get reactive, get responsive. What would you do? What would your 3-year-old self do in response to that? And like I was saying to Amber, it's like, I would bring a snowstorm, snowstorm to this area. It really does help, because remember, we're a majority of our being is frequency. Every thought sends a ripple in frequency. It does something, right? So when we remember that, things get really interesting, because we kind of go, okay, from the particle level, I'm here, but on a frequency level, I can be anywhere, and I can be the wind that blows this away, or I can be the rain that washes this out, right? We can get into that playful part of ourselves. And by doing so, we are activating so many of the things that Ascension, we're moving into 5D. You're playing in 5D when you play in that way.
Right. Which is amazing. So lots of learnings, lots of lessons, lots of awareness. Feel free to share your takeaways in the chat. Any other content or themes or questions you have that you want us to dive deeper into, we're so happy to leave them in the comments. Of course, be sure to share this with anyone you think it would resonate with as well. And be sure to follow Therese and I. Where can everyone find you if they want to come and seek out more of your guidance, your knowledge, your support?
Yes. So if you want to do a reading, or if you want to see what else I offer, you can go to blythestarlight.com. I also have an Etsy shop, which is like going crazy right now because we're doing a big sale over there. So if you use code, if you go to Blythe Starlight on Etsy, you can check out my shop. And if you use code 4mom35, all one word, you get 35% off right now. So
oh, amazing. And your stuff is beautiful. I have some of it. So go get some Blythe Starlight. It's gorgeous. And if you are wanting to work more on your inner child, catch that ego, heal your relationship with food, etc., you can check out all my links below for a consultation, to join the membership, which we do a lot of inner child healing there as well. And for the masterclass, the emotional eating masterclass coming up next week, make sure you go and follow Therese, who is at Blythe Starlight on YouTube. She's tagged in the title, so it's easy to find her. And we come on live every Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. Mountain, which is 5:30 Eastern. So make sure if you want to come join us live, that's the time.
And 2:30 Pacific time.
2:30 Pacific. Yes. Thank you for putting that in.
We'll see you there.
Yes. So we can't wait for next week. Sending you all so much love, and thank you for joining us today.